If you really want to understand the future of artificial intelligence, we first need to take a trip back in time. But we're not going to a lab or some university. Nope. We're headed to a dusty Berlin courtyard right at the turn of the 20th century because we're there to meet a very special horse. And his story reveals an illusion that, even now, still shapes the technology we use every single day.
So, meet Clever Hans. And back in the early 1900s, this horse was a straight-up international celebrity. Why? Because people were absolutely convinced he was a genius. He wasn't just any horse. He was, as the New York Times put it, this marvel who could do almost anything but talk. And look, they weren't exaggerating. You'd have crowds gathering around, totally captivated, as someone asked Hans a question like, "Hey, what's 2 plus 3?" And he would just tap his hoof, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. He could even spell out complicated answers with a letterboard. It really seemed like he had this incredible intellect, and for his trainer, this was the ultimate proof that animals could reason just like us.
But as Hans' fame got bigger and bigger, so did the skepticism. Was this all just an elaborate hoax? Some kind of clever trick? Well, the German Board of Education decided they needed to find out. They launched a formal commission to test the claims and get to the bottom of the world's smartest horse.
So this investigation was super methodical. First, they tested Hans without his trainer there, and get this, he still got the answers right. The commission was just completely stumped. But then, a psychologist named Oscar Pfungst, he noticed something a little weird, an anomaly. Hans only ever got the answer wrong when the person asking the question didn't know the answer themselves. And that one observation, well, that was the key to unraveling the entire mystery.
So, what was the secret? Turns out, Hans wasn't a mathematician. He was just an incredibly astute observer. He was watching for these tiny, unconscious cues from the people around him. A tiny shift in posture, a change in facial expression, maybe their muscles tensing up just a little bit. All these little signals would happen the second he reached the correct number of taps. The humans were giving him the answer without even realizing it, and Hans was simply a genius at reading the room.
This whole phenomenon actually got a name, the Clever Hans effect. It's this powerful reminder of how our own unconscious signals can totally shape the answers we get. And look, this isn't just some quirky story from the history books. It is a massive, fundamental cautionary tale for the world of AI, where we are constantly at risk of building systems that look incredibly intelligent, but are actually just really, really good at finding shortcuts and reflecting our own hidden biases right back at us.
And that brings us to today. Because the book, Atlas of AI, argues that when we look at artificial intelligence, we're still falling for a very, very similar illusion. We are completely caught up in two powerful myths about what AI actually is.
Okay, so myth number 1 is this idea that computers are just like human minds. That we can create this disembodied intelligence out of pure logic. And myth number 2? That intelligence itself is some pure objective force that exists completely outside of our messy social, cultural, and political world. It's the same mistake, right? Just like people saw human-like reasoning in a horse, we see a pure abstract intelligence in machines.
The author Ellen Ullman frames this perfectly. She calls this core belief that the mind is a computer and a computer is a mind the original sin for the field. And that single idea has shaped decades of research, leading us to think of AI as this pure abstract thing, totally separate from the real, physical world.
So all this leads us to the book's central question. What is artificial intelligence? Really? If it's not some disembodied brain in a box, then what are we actually looking at?
And here's the book's provocative answer. It argues that AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. Instead, it says artificial intelligence is a registry of power. In other words, it's a system whose main job is to reflect and even amplify the social and political power that's already out there.
So what does that really mean? It means we have to stop thinking about AI as just lines of code floating in the cloud. We have to see the whole system, the minerals being dug out of the earth, the massive amounts of energy it burns, the hidden human workers who are labeling data all day, the vast global infrastructure it's built on, and the long, often biased histories of classification that it inherits. It's not magic, folks. It's a massive industrial machine.
And to really understand this complex reality, the book proposes that we need a whole new way of seeing. We need an atlas, and not just a single map, but a whole collection of maps that can show us AI from all these different perspectives and scales.
Just take a look at this map from the 16th century. It's obviously not a scientifically accurate picture of the world, right? It's a political and religious statement,
with Jerusalem sitting right there in the center. It's a great reminder that maps are never neutral. They are acts of power that frame how we see reality. And the book's big argument is that the way the AI industry is mapping our world today is also a deeply political act.
So the book, this Atlas of AI, basically takes us on a journey through these hidden landscapes. It starts with the planet, mapping out the real-world environmental costs, the lithium mining for batteries, the massive carbon footprint of data centers. Then it moves to labor, showing us the millions of invisible human workers in the gig economy that actually power so-called automation. It reveals how our data is harvested from our digital lives to feed these systems. It explores classification and how AI sorts people into categories, creating and reinforcing social hierarchies. It dives into affect, questioning the very shaky science behind emotion recognition. And finally, it examines the state, looking at how AI is being used as a tool of government and military power.
This diagram from the book just lays out the entire argument perfectly. Look at the bottom layer. That's the planet itself, the raw materials being literally extracted from the Earth. Right above that, you've got the layer of human labor. Then our data, our social lives being harvested. You can see how all of it is being compressed and funneled upwards just to serve the systems at the very top. This completely reframes AI not as computation, but as an act of extraction.
So the crucial point, the main takeaway, is this. AI is not a neutral tool. It is a structure of power. And because of the immense resources it takes to build it, it's a structure that almost inevitably ends up serving existing dominant interests.
And all of this leaves us with one final critical question. The systems of AI are fundamentally remapping our world. They're defining what gets seen, what gets measured, and who ultimately has power. So the question for all of us is, who gets to draw those lines?